and sometimes even into the soul. I live in a small apartment on the third floor of an old building where the windows overlook streets shimmering with the hazy glow of street lights under the rain. I'm not the kind of person who talks much about themselves. Honestly, I'd rather spend all day calculating the load for a bridge than talk about what's going on in my head. But if I must, I want you to understand that my life, like a structure, is built on sturdy concrete pillars. Yet, it's not without cracks that only I know about. I grew up in the suburbs of Seattle in a red brick house with a white picket fence. Everything had to be perfect, at least on the surface. My parents, Daniel and Patricia Barnes, were the embodiment of that perfection. My father, a retired accountant, always wore a pristine suit, even if he was just going to the grocery store for a loaf of bread. He had this habit of straightening his tie whenever he was stressed, like it was his way of keeping everything under control. "Daniel, it's just cereal," Mom would say from the doorway, holding her coffee mug with both hands, trying to hide the smile tugging at her lips. He'd grunt in reply, pulling the tie just a little tighter. "Image matters, Pat. You never know who you'll run into." My mother was an elementary school teacher. You wouldn't find a single family photo where her smile wasn't perfect. She had this calm, composed tone that could make children sit still with a single word. But behind that gentle voice were rules that didn't bend. "Family honor comes first," she used to tell us. Not angrily, never angrily. Her words were soft, but sharp as a blade. Never give the neighbors a reason to gossip. My younger sister, Eva, and I grew up under those rules, but we were as different as day and night. I was the rock, steady, quiet, always doing what was expected. I excelled in school, graduated with a degree in engineering from the University of Washington, and moved to Portland to work for a construction company. My job is to build bridges, sturdy structures that connect two riverbanks. And I love that. I love the feeling of controlling numbers and blueprints. My life, at least in my eyes, is like a technical drawing, clear, planned, with no room for deviation. Eva, on the other hand, was a flame. At 30, my sister was once a passionate journalist, always chasing big stories. Eva had eyes that sparkled as if they could light up a room and a way of speaking that made you feel like you were living in a novel. I still remember when she told us about her first investigative piece, something about a forgotten fishing community on the Washington coast. She sat at our parents' dining table, her hands slicing through the air like she was conducting an orchestra, her voice brimming with excitement. There was this glow in her expression, the kind of pure joy only Eva could radiate when she believed in something. "I talked to this old fisherman named Leo," she said, eyes wide. "He still mends his nets by hand. Says the sea's changing, says no one listens anymore." Dad just shook his head and muttered, "That girl, always dreaming." He didn't mean it cruelly, it was just who he was. Practical, cautious. But I remember glancing across the table, seeing the way Eva leaned forward over her notebook. Her eyes lit up like lanterns in a storm. And even though I didn't say anything, I was proud. Proud of her fire, her courage, the way she chased stories like they were treasure. Then Reed Walker entered the picture. He swept into Eva's life like a gust of wind, sharp suit, charming grin, full of sweet promises. Reed was the creative director of an advertising firm in Seattle, and he had this way of speaking that made you think he could sell the sun itself. Always polished, always on. The kind of guy who knew just how much cologne to wear and how to lean in just close enough to make you feel seen without ever really seeing you. I didn't like Reed much. There was something about him, too smooth, too curated. But Eva? She was smitten. I could see it in the way she laughed around him, in how she started answering her phone less, visiting less. She loved him with that all-consuming kind of love, the kind that made the rest of the world blur out of focus. They got married a year later, a small ceremony on Bainbridge Island. A little rain fell that day, but Eva didn't seem to notice. And then came the twins, Lena and Josie. I still remember getting the call. "Alec," she said, barely containing her breathless joy. "They're here." I drove straight from Portland to the hospital in Seattle. The roads were slick with rain, and I gripped the steering wheel like I was navigating a landslide. I brought carnations, Eva's favorite since she was a little girl, and used to pluck them from the neighbor's garden. When I stepped into that hospital room, she was lying in bed, her hair damp with sweat, cheeks flushed, but her eyes, God, her eyes, were shining. "Alec, look," she whispered, cradling two tiny red-faced bundles in her arms. "Lena and Josie, they're my whole world." I stood there, rooted, my hands stiff around the flower stems. I'm not good at showing emotions. Never have been. But in that moment, watching my sister glow with new life in her arms, I wanted to wrap my arms around her and tell her she'd done something incredible, that I was proud, that she was stronger than any bridge I could ever build. I thought everything would be fine. Eva had Reed. She had Lena and Josie. A beautiful family, a storybook life. I returned to Portland, back to work, back to Maya. Maya, my wife of 4 years. A legal specialist with a mind like steel and a smile like sunlight after weeks of overcast skies. We didn't have children yet, but we had plans. A bigger house. A vacation in Hawaii. Maybe one day, little feet running down the hallway. The future was drawn out in clean lines and careful angles. But life, as I've come to learn, doesn't give a damn about blueprints. It all came crashing down on a stormy night in Portland. The rain was heavy, the kind that pounds against windows like 1,000 tiny fists. I was sitting in my apartment, the third-floor one with the creaky floorboards and the view of streetlights glistening under the downpour. A cup of coffee had gone cold in my hands, untouched. Then my phone rang. I looked down. Eva. She rarely called this late. Alec. Her voice trembled, small, frayed at the edges, like a rope about to snap. Eva. I sat up, alert. What's going on? Reed, he's been cheating. The words came out brittle. He wants a divorce. I nearly dropped the coffee mug. My chest clenched. What? I said, standing now, the apartment around me suddenly too still. What happened? Where are you? I tried to keep my voice calm, but my mind was already in chaos. Eva took a deep breath, but when she spoke, her voice cracked wide open. I'm at Mom and Dad's, she said, barely audible, but they won't let me in. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Won't let you in? I asked, sitting upright, my voice sharp. What do you mean? She repeated herself, slower this time, and each word hit me like a punch to the gut. They said I'm a disgrace. They kicked me out. Wouldn't let me in the house. I'm standing in the rain with Lena and Josie. I don't know what to do. There was a pause, then a crackle on the line, and I heard it. The faint, unmistakable cry of a child. Alec, please help me. Something inside me snapped. I didn't think. Wait for me. I said, my voice steady low. I'm coming. I grabbed my car keys from the table, threw on my jacket, and bolted out the door. The rain slammed into my face as I bounded down the narrow stairwell of my building, heart pounding like a war drum. My old pickup groaned to life as I shoved the keys into the ignition, and I didn't even wait for the wipers to catch up. I hit the road. Portland to Seattle is more than a 3-hour drive, but that night felt endless. The rain poured like it meant to bury the world. Headlights barely pierced through the sheets of water. But I kept going, pushing forward. My mind raced. Eva, standing in the rain, with Lena and Josie. I couldn't get that image out of my head. My baby sister. The same girl who used to climb trees barefoot, who once cried over a broken bird's wing, who used to sneak ice cream into her room and blame it on me. Now she was out in the cold, in the dark, holding her daughters with nowhere to go, and our parents? They closed the door on her. That house, our house, flashed in my memory. The heavy oak door, the picture-perfect lawn, all those rules about keeping up appearances. Family honor comes first, Mom used to say. I felt anger burn behind my eyes. What kind of honor throws your own daughter into the rain? I clenched my jaw and blinked hard. I didn't want to think about them. Not now. I just had to get to Eva. The familiar streets of our childhood neighborhood slowly came into view, drenched in the yellow glow of streetlights. The red brick house stood there, still, silent, untouched by the storm around it. The white picket fence I once painted with Dad was soaked and sagging under the weight of the rain. And then I saw her. Eva was huddled under the porch, her knees drawn to her chest, clutching Lena and Josie close to her body. The twins were wrapped in damp blankets, their faces tucked into Eva's shoulders, asleep in exhaustion. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks, her thin jacket soaked through, offering no protection from the cold. I pulled the truck up to the curb, flung the door open, and ran to her. Eva, I called out, my voice cutting through the wind and rain. She looked up slowly. Her eyes were rimmed with red but dry, as if she had no more tears left to give. Alec, she whispered, like she couldn't believe I was really there. I don't know what to do anymore. I dropped to my knees in front of her, not caring that my jeans were instantly soaked. I reached out, adjusted the blankets around Lena and Josie, and then took Eva's cold, trembling hand in mine. Come on, I said, my voice firm but gentle. I'm taking you home. I don't know where I found that calm. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was all the years I'd spent being the steady one. But I knew this wasn't the time to be weak. I helped Eva to her feet. Her legs trembled as she stood, and she leaned on me more than she probably realized. I took Lena and Josie into my arms, one in each, and led her to the truck. The girls were warm against my chest, their tiny bodies heavy with sleep, and as I opened the back door and saw the car seats I'd installed months ago, just in case, for someday, a sharp pain stabbed at my chest. This wasn't the future I'd imagined, but it was the one in front of me, and I had to face it. Inside the truck, I cranked the heater and glanced at Eva. She sat in the passenger seat, soaked to the bone, staring out the window. Her hands were balled tightly in her lap. "You okay?" I asked softly. She didn't answer, just kept looking out into the rain, like maybe if she stared long enough, she'd disappear with it. I wanted to ask everything. What happened? When did she find out? How long had Reed been lying to her? But I knew better. Now wasn't the time for questions. Instead, I reached over to the console, thumbed through the playlist, and found the song I knew she always loved, Fleetwood Mac's Landslide. She used to play it on repeat in college, lying on the floor with her headphones on and eyes closed, saying, "It makes the world feel softer." The soft strum of the guitar filled the cab. I didn't say anything, just drove. On the way back to Portland, the rain didn't let up. It was like the whole world was mourning with her. I glanced over at Eva from time to time. She was holding the old emergency blanket I kept in the back seat, clutching it to her chest like it could hold her together. Her eyes were closed, but I could tell she wasn't asleep. The twins stirred a few times, small sighs and murmurs from the back seat, but they didn't cry. Too young to know the weight of what had just happened. Maybe that was a blessing. And me, I just kept driving. My hands steady on the wheel, my jaw tight. I kept thinking of Reed. That man with his smug smile, his expensive suits, and his fake sincerity. He'd promised Eva a life. He gave her this instead. And our parents, the people who were supposed to stand by her when the world fell apart, had slammed the door in her face. Left her and the girls to shiver in the rain. I didn't know who I was angrier at. By the time we pulled up to my apartment, the sky was beginning to shift. A faint slice of dawn cut through the rain, casting a pale glow on Portland's slick streets. Everything looked washed out, quiet, cold. I led Eva and the girls upstairs. My place felt smaller than usual, like the walls had closed in to make room for grief. I set down the diaper bags Eva had somehow managed to bring with her and pulled the old portable crib from the hallway closet. I lined it with fresh blankets and gently placed Lena and Josie inside. They stirred but didn't wake. Eva sat on the sofa, hunched forward, her eyes on her daughters. But her gaze was distant. "Empty. Thank you," she whispered. Her voice was hollow, like wind blowing through a shell. I walked over and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Go to sleep," I said gently. "Everything will be okay." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't entirely true. Things wouldn't be okay, not for a long time. There would be court dates, custody battles, late-night feedings, and long silences. But I also knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Eva face this alone. Not now. Not ever. The first few days with Eva and the two baby girls staying in my apartment felt like an endurance test I was never prepared for. My small apartment, which had barely been enough for Maya and me, was now filled with the constant sound of crying babies, half-washed bottles scattered near the sink, and diaper bags stacked like sandbags in the corner. I didn't complain. That's not who I am. But I couldn't deny it. My life had been turned upside down. I woke up earlier than usual most days, brewed the coffee, reviewed technical drawings on my laptop while the apartment was still quiet. Then, like clockwork, one of the girls would stir. A whimper, a cry, and suddenly I was balancing spreadsheets and diapers before sunrise. I'd quietly change Lena or Josie, whoever woke first, while Eva remained curled on the sofa, lost in her exhaustion. She rarely moved, clutching the girls like they were her last tether to solid ground. Her eyes had that vacant look, not distant like sleep, but like she was searching for a part of herself that Reed had stripped away. Maya was patient at first. God, she tried. She helped me prepare breakfast, warmed bottles, even sat beside Eva on the sofa, coaxing her with soft questions, small conversations. "Do you want to take a walk, just around the block?" Maya asked her one morning, placing a mug of tea on the table in front of her. Eva barely looked up. "Maybe later," she murmured, eyes fixed on Lena's sleeping face. Maya glanced at me, her smile thin. I could see she was trying. She always had this incredible ability to keep things balanced. That was one of the reasons I fell for her. She could spend her day juggling court deadlines, high-stakes negotiations, and still come home and laugh at my terrible dinner attempts. She was light in her room, sharp and calm at once. But slowly, things shifted. Little signs at first. The long sigh when Josie cried in the middle of the night. That quiet pause before she got up to heat the bottle. The way she looked at me when I spent an entire evening rocking Lena to sleep in the living room instead of sitting with her on the couch like we used to. Or how she started moving her things, her books, her laptop, even her favorite throw blanket, to a small corner of the apartment, clearing space for Eva's things without saying a word. One evening, we were sitting in the kitchen. The girls were finally asleep. Eva was in the shower. The rain had returned to Portland, tapping against the window like it always did. Maya was holding a glass of wine, swirling it slowly. Her face was tired, the circles under her eyes darker than I remembered. "Are you tired?" she asked softly, not looking directly at me. I glanced at her, then at the clock. It was nearly midnight. I could still hear the baby monitor's faint static in the background. Yeah, I said, rubbing my forehead. But Eva needs me. She has no one else. Maya nodded, but there was something about the way her lips tightened. Something about the way her eyes didn't meet mine. I understand, she said finally. But her voice carried a distance, like she was trying to believe it herself. In the weeks that followed, a new rhythm formed. It wasn't smooth, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. I'd wake up before dawn, feed the girls, shower, then head to work. Out on the construction sites, amidst rising pillars and girders, I found the kind of order that had vanished from my personal life. There, I could calculate, measure, control. And slowly, Eva began to speak again. Late one night, after the girls had fallen asleep, she sat beside me at the kitchen table. She didn't look at me at first, just stared at her hands. It started with late nights, she said. He'd say he was stuck in meetings. Then I found messages. Photos. He said she was exciting. Younger. That I'd changed. I didn't speak. I couldn't trust myself to. I didn't want to believe it, she continued. I kept thinking maybe it was my fault. Maybe I stopped being interesting. But then, he said he wanted out. Just like that. I reached over and squeezed her hand. You'll get through this, I told her. I hoped I sounded more certain than I felt. And through all of it, Lena and Josie kept us grounded. They were only 5 months old, but they lit up our days like little suns. I never expected I could love 2 tiny humans so much. When I picked up Josie in the mornings and she smiled at me, her big round eyes beaming like I was her whole world, I felt stronger. Needed. Lena was fussier, more particular. But when she gripped my finger tight and wouldn't let go, it made me feel like I'd do anything to protect them. Anything. I got used to the early morning bottles. The diaper bag slung over my shoulder. I even started humming lullabies at night, though my voice was so out of tune that one evening Eva chuckled from the sofa. Oh my God, she said, her first real laugh in days. Did you just butcher Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star? I smirked, cradling Josie against my chest. Hey, she's asleep, isn't she? But not everything was smooth. Maya started to change. The evenings Maya used to spend with Eva and me, just chatting about small things, laughing over nothing, began slipping into silence. She'd come home later from the office, saying there was too much on her plate. Other times, she'd retreat to the bedroom early, claiming she needed rest. But I knew it wasn't just fatigue. She was pulling away. I noticed, but I didn't know what to do about it. Every time I tried to talk to her, she'd flash a tired, almost forced smile and say, I'm fine, Alec. You focus on taking care of Eva and the girls. It didn't feel fine. One evening, after Eva had gone to bed and the girls were finally asleep, Maya tugged gently at my sleeve and led me out onto the balcony. The rain had paused for once, but the air still held its chill, thick with dampness. The street below shimmered with the glow of scattered streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. For a moment, we just stood there in silence. Then she crossed her arms and stared out at the empty street. Do you ever think about us? She asked, her voice quiet, but sharp like the edge of glass. I was taken aback. I turned toward her slowly. What do you mean? I asked, trying to sound steady, even though I felt anything but. Maya turned to face me, and the frustration in her eyes was unmistakable. I mean us, Alec. Our life. Before Eva and the girls came. We had plans. Remember? A bigger house. That vacation we kept talking about. Starting a family of our own. She paused, breathing in sharply through her nose. And now, she continued, you spend all day at work, and the rest of the time taking care of your sister and your nieces. And she trailed off for a second, her voice catching. I feel like I'm on the sidelines. Her words landed like stones. I wanted to respond, but my throat tightened. She wasn't wrong. I had been consumed by all of this. But what was I supposed to do? Eva had no one else. I couldn't turn my back on her, not after what she'd been through. Maya, I said softly, placing my hand on her shoulder. But she stepped back, brushing my hand away with a quiet, almost tired motion. You don't get it, she said, shaking her head. I'm not being selfish. I know Eva needs you. I know what she's going through is horrible. But I need you too, Alec. We're married. Or did you forget that? Her voice wasn't angry. It was hurt. Deeply hurt. I didn't have an answer. The silence that followed stretched between us like a chasm. Finally, Maya turned, opened the balcony door, and walked back inside. She didn't slam it, just closed it gently, leaving me standing alone in the cold. I leaned against the railing, staring down at the quiet street below. The wet asphalt reflected light like glass. Everything looked calm, still, but inside me, something was shifting, cracking. I told myself I'd fix it, that I'd find a way to balance it all. But a voice deep inside me whispered, this isn't something you can draft or measure. This isn't a structure you can repair with just a plan. I stepped back into the apartment. The soft, steady patter of rain returned, drumming lightly on the windows. It was like the storm had paused just long enough to let Maya say her piece, and now it was back to remind me that nothing had truly calmed. I sank onto the sofa, still damp from where Eva had sat earlier, and stared at my phone, turning it over in my hands. My mind swirled with everything: Maya's words, Eva's broken voice, the cries of the girls, the silence of our parents. Would they ever come around? Would they change their minds? I didn't know, but something in me needed to find out. I unlocked my phone and scrolled to Mom. My thumb hovered for a second before I pressed call. The rings felt longer than usual. Too long. Like each one stretched the tension in my chest just a little tighter. I was about to hang up when I finally heard her voice, calm, distant, formal. "Alec, it's late. What's this about?" I took a deep breath and tried to steady my voice. "Mom," I said, "it's about Eva. She's staying with me. I thought you and Dad should know what's happened." I recounted everything, as simply as I could. I didn't want to draw it out, didn't want to relive it more than I already had. I told her about Reed's affair, about his sudden demand for a divorce, and about how Eva had shown up at their doorstep in the middle of a storm, soaked and desperate, with her 2 babies in her arms, only to be turned away. I waited after that, hoped for some flicker of regret, or even hesitation, but there was only silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother spoke, and her voice came through sharp, cold, and familiar, like the blade I'd known all my life. "Eva brought this on herself, Alec. A proper wife doesn't let her husband walk away like that. I taught her how to keep a family together, but she didn't listen." I gripped the phone tighter, already feeling my jaw clench. "I don't have a daughter who gets abandoned by her husband like that." Her words echoed, and for a second I couldn't respond. I could feel my blood heating in my veins, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Mom," I said slowly, "she's your daughter. She needs help. Lena and Josie, they're your grandchildren. Don't you see how wrong this is? Kicking her out, in the middle of a storm." She let out a sigh, one of those tired, condescending sounds she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. "Alec, you don't understand. Our family has honor. What would the neighbors think if they saw her at our doorstep like that? Abandoned. With 2 children? Your father and I can't have the whole neighborhood talking." I stared at the wall, willing myself to keep my voice from rising. "Honor," I whispered. "You're talking about honor when you left your own daughter standing in the rain with 2 5-month-old babies." I stopped, hearing Josie stir softly from the living room. I lowered my voice. "Do you even hear yourself?" There was a moment of static, and then another voice broke through, deep, firm, and stern. "Don't be disrespectful," Dad said. His voice carried that same tone he used when I was a kid and had broken the garage window. Heavy. Final. He must have been listening on speaker the whole time. "The Barnes family has no place for stains," he said. "Eva chose her path. She has to face the consequences. And you should be careful, Alec. Don't let yourself get dragged into this mess." My breath caught in my throat. I stood there, frozen, the phone pressed to my ear like I hadn't heard him right. "Dad," I said, my voice thin but fierce, "Eva is my sister. Your daughter. Don't you feel any responsibility?" "Our responsibility," he said coldly, "is to uphold the family's honor. If you want to help your sister, that's your choice. But don't expect us to get involved." Then the line went dead. Just a cold beep in my ear. I stayed in the hallway for a long moment, staring down at the screen. My hand was still clenched around the phone. All I could see in my mind was Eva, the night I found her under that porch, soaked, trembling, clutching her girls. And now our parents, the same people who raised us in that red brick house of rules and appearances, had erased her as if she were nothing. And Lena and Josie? 2 innocent children, 2 tiny lives, branded as stains by their own grandparents. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and looked toward the living room. Josie had quieted. The rain outside hadn't stopped. It never did. Not really, but it sounded softer now, like it was trying to calm the fire in my chest. But it couldn't. Not entirely. Over the next few months, the tension in the apartment grew thicker. Eva had started to recover. Slowly, she began showering every day again. She made bottles without being asked, even offered to cook sometimes, though cooking had never really been her thing. She smiled at the girls more, and once or twice I even caught her humming when she thought no one was listening. But she still leaned on me for everything, and I didn't blame her. She was navigating a kind of wreckage no one prepares for: betrayal from the man she loved, and complete abandonment from the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally. Being a single mother to 2 infants? That was already enough to break most people. But Eva was trying. Really trying. Maya, though she was changing. Her patience had turned to distance. Her quiet sighs to sharp words. It started with small remarks, passive at first. "Are they going to stay here forever?" she asked one morning while rinsing her coffee cup, eyes fixed on the sink. I looked up from the floor where I was burping Lena. It's just until Eva gets back on her feet. And how long do you think that'll take? She asked, wiping her hands a little too briskly. Because I didn't sign up to live with your entire family, Alec. I didn't have an answer. I told myself it was temporary. That Eva would heal, maybe find a job, maybe get her own place. But truthfully, I didn't know how long that would take. And Maya could sense the uncertainty in my silence. Then came the night it all fell apart. I was on the sofa with Josie curled against my chest, her tiny fist tangled in my shirt. Eva was in the bathroom giving Lena a bath, her soft voice rising and falling with a lullaby. The apartment was filled with the kind of warmth that had been missing for so long, until Maya walked in. She was holding a stack of papers in her hand. Her face was hard, her jaw tight. We need to talk, she said flatly. I gently placed Josie in her crib and followed Maya to the bedroom. She closed the door behind us and turned toward me like she'd been holding something in for weeks. Alec, I can't do this anymore. I already knew what she meant, but I asked anyway. Do what? You know exactly what, she snapped. Her voice wasn't yelling, but it trembled with something more powerful than volume, rage and hurt wrapped into one. You spend all day, every day, on Eva and the girls. I'm no longer your priority, and I don't want to live in a home where I feel like an outsider. I stood there, searching for the right words, something that would fix it, explain it. But nothing came. I'm not saying I'm not proud of you, she added. You're doing the right thing by her. But what about me? What about us? I stepped closer, gently reached for her shoulder. Maya, I said, my voice cracking. You can't ask me to choose. She looked at me, eyes glassy with tears. But I am asking, she whispered. Because I need a husband. And right now, I don't have one. She turned, opened the bedroom door, and walked out, leaving me in silence. The days that followed felt like living inside a glass box under pressure, every moment tight with tension. Maya moved through the apartment like a ghost, avoiding eye contact, speaking only when necessary. Bit by bit, she started packing. First her toiletries, then her books. Then one evening, her framed diploma was gone from the shelf. I kept trying. I made coffee for her in the mornings. I offered to sit and talk, but she always answered with the same calm, distant expression. You're a great brother, Alec, she told me quietly one morning as she zipped up her suitcase. But I need a husband. I stood by the door as she walked down the hallway, her suitcase wheels thudding softly on the carpet. The sound echoed. Final. Like the ticking of a clock that had run out of time. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not in front of Eva. Not in front of the girls. I just stood there as the door closed behind her. Then I turned and walked back into the living room. Eva was holding Josie, bouncing her gently in her arms. Her eyes were wide, her face drawn with concern. Alec, she said cautiously, what's going on? I shook my head. It's nothing, I said, forcing the lie. I sat down beside her, watching Josie's tiny face, trying to focus on her steady breathing. Everything will be okay. But even as I said it, I felt the hollowness in those words. The apartment was quieter after that. Maya's absence left behind a silence that wasn't peaceful. It was a heavy kind of quiet, the kind that fills up every corner like fog, the kind that lingers, the kind that reminds you someone's gone. She was gone, and I was left with Elise, Lena, and Josie, in an apartment now filled with voids I didn't know how to fill. I tried to keep everything steady, at least on the surface. I got up early, went to work, came home, helped with the girls, and made sure Eva never saw the cracks in my heart. I told myself there was no time to fall apart. Not now. But every night, when I lay on the sofa alone, listening to the rain tapping gently against the windows, Maya would find her way back into my thoughts. Her smile, the sound of her laugh echoing in the kitchen, the plans we made, the house with the sunroom, the trip to Hawaii we never took. It all felt like dust now, blown away by everything that had happened. Eva, though, she was starting to come back to life. It was subtle at first. She got up earlier, started making coffee in the morning, always black, just the way I liked it. She folded the girls' laundry neatly into small stacks on the edge of the couch. I'd catch her humming lullabies to Josie and Lena, soft and low, her voice almost unsure, like she was testing the sound of herself again. One evening, after I got home from a long day at a construction site, my jeans streaked with dried mud, the sharp smell of concrete still clinging to my skin, I found Eva at the kitchen table. The girls were quiet, both drifting in and out of sleep in their cribs, and Eva was hunched over a notebook, her pen moving fast and steady across the page. She didn't even look up when I stepped inside. I dropped my keys on the counter and shrugged off my jacket. What are you writing? I asked, walking over to her. I pulled out a chair and sat across from her, watching the way her eyes flicked over the lines like she was chasing a thought before it vanished. She looked up at me, startled for a second, like she'd forgotten I was even there. A little color rose in her cheeks, and she pushed the notebook toward me. Just some thoughts, she said softly. I think I need to write them down, so I don't forget what I've been through. I glanced at the first page, then another, flipping through the worn paper filled with her slanted, looping handwriting. But they weren't just thoughts. They were pieces of her, raw, unfiltered, honest. She wrote about that night, standing at Mom and Dad's porch, rain soaking her skin, clutching Lena and Josie and wondering if she'd made the worst mistake of her life. She wrote about Reed, and how everything he said felt like it was chiseling her apart piece by piece. And she wrote about me, how I drove 3 hours in the middle of the night without hesitation, how I was the only person who made her feel safe when her entire world collapsed. My throat tightened. Eva, I said, carefully closing the notebook, this is really good. She smiled, tentative at first, but real. I don't know, she said, brushing a stray strand of hair behind her ear. I just thought if I write it all down, maybe I'll figure out who I am. After all this. From that night on, the notebook never left her side. It became her ritual, her compass. Once the girls were asleep, Eva would sit at the kitchen table under the dim yellow light of the lamp, scribbling into it with fierce focus. Some nights, she wrote past midnight. I'd watch her sometimes, eyes tired, not from grief anymore, but from the effort of pulling herself back together, one sentence at a time. I didn't intrude. I'd make coffee, set it beside her, then quietly sit nearby with my blueprints or scroll through the day's news. I knew she needed that space. I also knew she needed to know someone was there. Then one morning, as I was tying my boots and getting ready to head to work, Eva called out from behind me. Alec, can you read this? I turned around and saw her holding a stack of papers, much thicker than that old notebook. She walked over and handed it to me, a hint of nervousness in her eyes. I think I've finished a part of it, she said. I want to know what you think. I sat down at the kitchen table and flipped through the thick stack of pages Eva handed me. Her handwriting was cleaner now, more confident. The words flowed better, the pacing tighter. But what stopped me, what really got me, was the heart behind it all. It was Eva's story. From the day she met Reed, how he swept her off her feet with his charm and ambition, through the hopeful glow of her pregnancy, to the betrayal that cracked her world apart. She wrote about the night she stood outside our childhood home, rain soaking her skin and her pride, with Lena and Josie bundled in blankets and tears. She wrote about waking up in my apartment, too hollow to speak, and what it felt like to slowly begin again. But what hit me hardest were the pages where she wrote about me. She called me her lighthouse in the storm. She wrote that while everything else collapsed, I stood there, steady, unmoving, guiding her back when she was lost. She said I was the only reason she didn't fall completely apart. I had to look away from the page. I could feel tears pushing against my eyes, but I didn't want her to see them. I blinked a few times and set the pages down gently. Eva, this, I said, my voice catching slightly, it's really special. You should do something with it. Do something? She asked, frowning like I'd just suggested she run for mayor. What do you mean? Like publish it? Yeah, I said. I wasn't even sure how realistic it was, but it felt right. Your story, it could help someone. Maybe a lot of people. Someone going through what you've been through. Eva laughed, but it was a small, uncertain laugh, skeptical. Who'd want to read about me? A single mom ditched by her husband and disowned by her family. A lot of people, I replied. And this time, I meant it. Because you're not just someone who was abandoned. You're someone who got back up. She went quiet, her gaze falling to the printed pages in front of her. She stared at them like she was seeing something new in her own words. Then she nodded slowly. I'll think about it, she said. But I saw something flicker in her eyes. A spark. A tiny flame trying to catch. I didn't push her, but the idea stayed with me. And the next day during my lunch break at the site, I pulled out my phone and called Tobias, an old college friend. He and I used to cram for finals over takeout and late-night coffee. While I went into engineering, Tobias had chased his dream and opened a small independent publishing house in Portland. I gave him the short version, my sister's story, the heartbreak, the kids, the writing. I told him how much it meant to her, and to me. Send it over, Tobias said without hesitation. If it's half as good as you're saying, I'll seriously consider it. I didn't tell Eva about the call. I didn't want to raise her hopes unless I was sure. Instead, I did what I could quietly. I bought her more paper, new pens, even found a used laptop that still worked well enough. Every night, she typed away under the warm light of the table lamp. I watched her slowly find herself again, word by word, sentence by sentence. And eventually, her manuscript took shape. She titled it Shelter from the Storm. I helped where I could, fixing typos, suggesting tiny edits, but mostly I just encouraged her. Because the story was hers. All I did was believe in it. One night, after she'd finished formatting it, she looked up at me across the table, a small tremble in her hands. "Alec, are you sure it's okay?" she asked, her voice low. "It's more than okay," I said, resting my hand gently on her shoulder. "It's you, Eva. It's your story." Finally, after much convincing, she agreed to send it. I'll never forget the way her hands hovered over the keyboard, how her finger hesitated on the mouse before clicking send. Her whole body tensed. She looked up at me with wide, frightened eyes. "What if they don't like it, Alec?" "Then you're still Eva," I replied quietly. "And you've already done something most people wouldn't dare to do. You told your story." 2 weeks later, Tobias called. I was standing at the base of a bridge under construction, steel girders towering overhead, when my phone rang. I had to step away from the noise of the site to hear him clearly. "Alec, your sister's manuscript, it's really special," he said. "It's raw, emotional, and powerful. I want to publish it." I nearly dropped my phone. "Really?" I asked, my voice going embarrassingly high. "Absolutely. But I'd love to meet Eva. Talk details. Can you arrange that?" That evening, after dinner, I broke the news to her. Eva was sipping coffee on the sofa, cradling Josie, her hair a little messy from a long day with the girls. When I told her, she froze. She clutched her mug tighter. "Alec, are you serious? They want to publish my book?" "Absolutely," I said, smiling. Eva threw her arms around me, her body trembling with joy, and I held her tightly as she whispered, "I can't believe this." Her tears soaked into my shirt, but I didn't care. Lena and Josie looked up from the rug where they'd been playing and toddled toward us, sensing the energy in the room. Eva scooped Lena into her arms while I lifted Josie, the four of us standing in a moment I knew I'd never forget. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Eva met with Tobias and his editorial team, reviewing edits, discussing cover designs, and working out release strategies. I stayed out of the spotlight, right where I preferred to be. I drove her to meetings, kept Lena and Josie entertained, handled the laundry and grocery runs, and made sure she had space to write and revise without interruptions. I didn't want her to know I'd contacted Tobias first. This was her moment, and I needed it to be hers completely. Her victory. Her voice. The day Shelter from the Storm officially hit shelves, I stood at the back corner of a cozy little Portland bookstore, trying not to cry. Eva wore a simple green dress, nothing flashy, but she lit up the entire room. Her hair was swept back, her earrings small silver hoops, but her eyes, they gleamed. The fire was back. Only a few dozen people showed up, mostly friends of Tobias's, a few curious locals, and a couple of readers Eva had chatted with online. She was nervous, dropped her pen twice. Her voice shook during her opening remarks. But then she started telling her story, not just reading from the book, but telling it, the way only Eva could, with honesty, vulnerability, and strength. I stood there, Josie asleep in my arms, Lena clutching my pinky like it was the most important thing in the world. And in that moment, watching my sister under warm bookstore lights, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not closure, just a quiet pride I didn't know I was capable of feeling. The book didn't explode right away. Sales were slow at first, and we expected that. Publishing's not easy, especially from a small press in a rainy corner of the country. But one evening, while I was preparing a bottle for Josie, Eva burst into the kitchen, her face flushed, her phone in her hand. "Alec," she shouted, "look at this." She turned the screen toward me, eyes wide. It was a social media post, just a few lines and a photo of the book cover. A single mother from Seattle had written, "Shelter from the Storm isn't just a book. It's a flame for those who've been abandoned. Read it. You won't regret it." It caught fire. That post was shared hundreds of times, then thousands. Book clubs started messaging Eva. Women's support groups online began circulating the post and calling her a quiet hero. I watched her reading through the comments at night, her eyes glassy, her hand over her mouth in disbelief. Within weeks, the book had sold tens of thousands of copies. It made it onto a local paper's weekly bestseller list. I came home one night from the job site to find Eva sitting frozen at the kitchen table, her laptop open, her hand trembling. "Alec," she said, "read this." It was an email from Tobias. A major publishing house wanted to partner for national distribution. She stared at it, blinking, rereading it over and over. "Is this real?" she whispered. I laughed and wrapped my arms around her. "It's real, little sis. You did it." And then everything accelerated. First a deal in the UK, then translation offers, France, Germany, even Japan. I had no idea what it felt like to see your name printed in 5 different languages, but I saw what it did to Eva. She walked differently, stood taller, smiled more. She was no longer the shattered woman I'd found on our parents' porch that night. She was Elle Barnes now, author, mother, voice for the unheard. And with the success came invitations. Local radio, podcasts, and then one day, a talk show in Portland reached out. One of those afternoon segments that aired right after the news. Eva agreed, even though she was nervous. I sat in the front row of the studio audience, bouncing Lena on my lap, while Josie sat in Eva's dressing room with a babysitter. I watched as she took her seat under the bright lights, the cameras turning, the host smiling wide and warm. And now, the host said, "We welcome Elle Barnes, the voice behind Shelter from the Storm, to talk about her journey as a single mother." I sat in the audience holding Lena and Josie, trying to keep them quiet while Eva spoke on stage. Josie wriggled in my lap, fingers tangled in the collar of my shirt, while Lena leaned against my shoulder with her thumb in her mouth. I gently bounced them, whispering softly in their ears, but my eyes never left Eva. She was nervous at first, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her green dress, her voice a little shaky, but when the audience clapped, I saw her shoulders relax. Something shifted in her posture, in her voice. Confidence. Warmth. She was coming alive in front of them. "I didn't do it alone," she said suddenly, her voice softer now, eyes scanning the crowd until they found me. "My brother Alec pulled me out of the darkness." I froze, the weight of her words hitting me like a wave. I bowed my head, pretending to fix Josie's tiny curls, but really, I just needed to hide my face. The tears were already there, no stopping them now. I wasn't the kind of man who cried in public, but something about hearing those words, in front of all those people, it cracked something open in me. That talk show was just the beginning. A month later, Eva was invited to speak at a women's conference in Seattle. She stood on stage before hundreds, maybe thousands, of women, and I heard later how powerful she was. How the room went so quiet you could hear breath. And how, when she finished, the applause was so loud and long it rattled the windows. I didn't go that time. Someone had to stay home with the girls, and that someone was me. Eva called me right after, her voice thick with emotion. "Alec," she said, breathless. They gave me a standing ovation. They said I inspired them. I smiled, even though something in me ached. "You deserve it, Eva," I said. And I meant it. I was proud of her, no question. But after I hung up, I looked around the apartment. Bottles drying on a dish towel, toys scattered across the floor, Josie sleeping in her crib, Lena in the corner, gnawing on a book cover. Everything was fine. Everything was stable. And yet, what about me? I whispered, the words catching in my throat before I even realized I'd said them aloud. I had given everything. My marriage, my space, my energy, and I didn't regret any of it, not really. But Eva's brilliance, undeniable, radiant, cast a long shadow. And I lived in it. Then, one day, Tobias called me. I was loading materials at a site, the back of my shirt soaked with sweat, when my phone rang. "Alec," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "We want to host a special event in Portland. A big talk. And we want you and Eva on stage together. Your story, your bond, your sacrifice. It's the heart of the book." I hesitated, holding the phone between my ear and shoulder while I wiped my hands on my jeans. "I'm not a speaker, Tobias. That's Eva's thing. But you're part of the story," he insisted. "People want to hear from you, Alec. They want to know about the brother who did everything for his sister." I didn't want to do it. Public speaking was never my thing. Being in the spotlight made my skin crawl. But that night, when I told Eva, she took my hand. "Alec, please," she said gently. "I want people to know how amazing you are. They need to hear it from you." So I said yes. The event took place in a small theater in downtown Portland, 500 seats, filled to the brim. I stood backstage, palms sweating, trying to control my breathing. Eva walked onto the stage first, radiant again in that green dress. Her voice was steady now, seasoned. She spoke with grace, poise, and pain, the kind that healed. Then she paused and turned toward me. "My brother Alex saved me," she said, her voice catching. "He didn't just give me a home. He gave me the belief that I could stand again." I swallowed hard. The stage lights blinded me as I walked out, and every instinct screamed to turn around. But Eva reached for my hand, and I stayed. I told my part. The rainy night, the drive, the exhaustion, the choices. I said what I always believed. I'm not a hero. I'm just a brother doing what I had to do. The audience stood, clapping loud and long. I looked at Eva, her eyes shining through tears, and I knew. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every quiet goodbye to the life I'd once planned, it was all worth it. We had healed together. Not just for ourselves, but for the thousands of people now listening to our story. I thought the storm had passed. But life never runs out of storms. Just a few weeks after our talk, I came home to find a white envelope tucked among the usual stack of mail. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Tight, precise, unyielding. It was my mother's. As I opened it, an uneasy feeling settled deep in my gut. I didn't know what I expected, maybe a reluctant olive branch, maybe silence, But not this. Inside was a short, cold letter in that same rigid script I'd grown up seeing on fridge notes and holiday cards. Daniel and Patricia Barnes. Our parents. Eva, it began. Your book is an affront to the family's honor. You have publicly slandered us, causing the entire neighborhood to shun us. We demand that you withdraw the book from the market and issue a public apology. If not, we will take legal action. That was it. No warmth. No attempt at understanding. Just a veiled threat wrapped in formal language. I read it again, then a third time, as if my brain refused to register the cruelty of it. My hands trembled slightly. It was one thing to cut your daughter off, but to sue her? I clenched the letter in my fist and stood frozen in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at nothing. Then I called out, Eva, can you come here? She walked in, Lena on her hip, and sat Josie and the bouncer before turning to me. What is it? Read this, I said, handing her the letter. She took it, eyes scanning quickly. I watched her face shift, first confusion, then shock, then pain. And finally, a look I hadn't seen in a long time. Steel. Resolve. They want me to withdraw the book? She asked, her voice trembling but fierce. After everything? After turning me away in the rain, calling my daughter's stains, they want me to apologize? What are you going to do? I asked, though I already knew. You could feel it in the air, the quiet fire building behind her eyes. She folded the letter, hands shaking slightly, and set it on the table like it was something dirty. I'm not withdrawing the book. This is my story, our story. I won't let them control me anymore. I nodded and reached for her hand. I'm with you, no matter what happens. But I didn't expect what happened next. A week later, I came home from work to find a thick envelope on the kitchen counter. Eva had opened it. Her face was pale. Alec, she said quietly, they filed a lawsuit. I blinked. You're serious? She handed me the papers. A Seattle law firm representing Daniel and Patricia Barnes. A formal claim, defamation of character. The suit argued that while they weren't mentioned by name, Eva's memoir portrayed them as cruel and unloving, causing damage to their reputation and standing in their community. They were demanding the book be withdrawn, a public apology be issued, and monetary compensation. I sat down heavily, the weight of it all knocking the breath out of me. I knew our parents cared too much about appearances, but this was war. Eva didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just sat down, Lena fussing in her arms, Josie gurgling on a blanket nearby. She stared straight ahead and whispered, they want to fight? Fine. I'm not backing down. The next few days moved like a whirlwind. I don't even know how it started, but by the end of the week, a Seattle newspaper had run a story on the front page. Parents sue daughter for daring to tell the truth. There was a picture of Eva on the cover, smiling faintly, one arm wrapped around Lena, Josie asleep in a carrier on her chest. They quoted parts of the book, especially the part about that rainy night. I could practically hear Mom and Dad choking on their morning coffee reading it. Then came the social media storm. Some people criticized Eva. Air your dirty laundry in private, they said. Family matters don't belong in books. But they were the minority. Most of the world stood behind her. People reposted quotes from her memoir. Eva Barnes is a brave mother, one tweet said. She told the truth, and now her family wants to silence her. It was shared thousands of times. Suddenly, Eva wasn't just a writer. She was a symbol, a woman who refused to stay silent. But I could see the toll it was taking on her. TV stations began calling. Big names. National networks. They wanted interviews. Opinions. Sound bites about the lawsuit and our family. Eva turned most of them down, repeating a simple line whenever she did speak. I wrote the truth. I don't regret it. But behind closed doors, she wasn't sleeping. The circles under her eyes grew darker. Her hands trembled more often. And at night, I'd find her curled up on the sofa holding Lena or Josie close to her chest, rocking gently, humming songs with no words. I knew she was trying to stay strong, but the lawsuit was another knife cutting into old wounds. Every day she woke up and held Lena and Josie, cooked breakfast, and tried to smile, but I could see the weight pressing down on her. She didn't say it, but I knew she was breaking inside. I didn't stay on the sidelines. I couldn't. I reached out to Shasha, an old lawyer friend of Maya's who I'd always respected. She was sharp, compassionate, and didn't scare easily. After I told her everything, she asked for a copy of Eva's book. The next day, she called me. Alec, she said, her voice steady but emotional. Her story is powerful. I'll do everything to protect her. Shasha didn't waste time. She began building the case with the same intensity one used to see Maya bring to court. Eva was hesitant at first, but Shasha made it easy. She never pushed, never pried. Just listened. Patiently. Thoroughly. I remember one evening. Eva sat at the kitchen table, holding a cup of cold tea while Shasha took notes. Her voice shook as she talked about that night. I knocked for over 5 minutes. Eva said, It was raining so hard I could barely see. I was soaked, holding both girls in my arms. I heard them inside. Mom told me through the door not to make a scene. Shasha nodded, jotting it all down. Did she say anything else? Eva pulled out her phone, scrolling silently. She texted me after. Said, "Don't ever come back, Eva. You made your bed." She passed the phone across the table. Shasha took it without saying a word, but I saw the way her jaw clenched. A week later, Shasha came back with a blurry screenshot from a neighbor's security camera. The image showed Eva on the porch, clutching Lena and Josie, her body hunched against the cold. It was grainy, but unmistakable. She also found a voicemail from our father Eva had saved. In it, he called her a stain on the Barnes family and told her not to reach out again. I played it alone in the living room later that night. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. The day of the trial, I sat beside Eva in the courtroom, my heart pounding like I'd just stepped onto a swaying scaffold. Eva was calm, holding herself together. The girls were with a sitter. I think it was the first time in weeks she hadn't had them in her arms. Our parents sat on the other side of the room. Dad in one of his tailored suits, hands folded neatly. Mom with her signature pearls and a face like stone. They didn't look at us. Not once. Their lawyer was ruthless. Miss Barnes deliberately defamed her parents. He snapped. She exploited a private family matter for sympathy and profit. Her book has led to harassment, social isolation, and public shaming. I wanted to shout, to stand up and ask how they could twist everything so far from the truth, but I didn't move. I just gripped the edge of my chair and waited for Shasha. She stood like a calm wave cutting through fire. What Miss Barnes wrote, she said, isn't fiction. It's her life. The defendants told her not to come back. They refused her shelter in a storm. They called their daughter and granddaughter stains. This, she held up the blurry security photo, is not defamation. It's documentation. The courtroom was silent as the footage played. Eve on that porch, soaked, clutching her babies. A ghost under the rain. I heard someone sniff behind us. A woman wiped her eyes. Eva grabbed my hand under the table. Her fingers trembled. When the judge called on her to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice wavered for just a second before finding its rhythm. I didn't write the book to hurt anyone, she said. I wrote it because I didn't know how else to survive. I wrote it for other women like me, to say, you're not alone. If the truth hurts, that's not my fault. Those words hung in the air like smoke. 3 days. That's how long the trial lasted. But to me, it felt like 3 years. When the verdict came, I couldn't breathe. The court finds in favor of the defendant, Eva Barnes, the judge said. The content of the book is factual and protected under free speech. The plaintiffs are ordered to pay the defendant's legal fees. I didn't cheer. No one did. It wasn't that kind of moment. The reporters outside swarmed. News outlets ran stories that night. Barnes' family tries to silence daughter, fails. Author wins against parents who abandoned her. On social media, it blew up. People were furious. They called our parents toxic, cruel, hypocritical. And that red brick house I grew up in, the one with the trimmed hedges and holiday wreaths, it became a symbol of pride gone wrong. But I didn't feel victorious. As we walked out of the courthouse, Eva held Lena and Josie tightly, her head low. I walked beside her, shielding her from the cameras. Alec, she whispered. I just wanted them to understand. I didn't know what to say. I squeezed her hand instead. No words could fix what had been done. No verdict could mend the shattered pieces between us and them. Our parents had chosen their image over their daughter. And now they'd lost both. After the lawsuit with our parents, it seemed like life might finally settle into some semblance of peace. But I soon learned that storms never come alone. The success of Eva's memoir, Shelter from the Storm, had propelled her to new heights, book clubs, podcasts, speaking panels, but it also brought unforeseen troubles. And like clockwork, just when I thought we might get a moment of peace, the next storm came right on schedule. Reed Walker, the man who shattered Eva's world. In the book, Eva never used his name. But even without it, the details were clear to anyone who knew them. A Seattle advertising creative director, the man who chose ambition and a colleague over his family, and the one who turned his back the night his wife needed him most. That was all it took. Social media did the rest. One tweet, one photo, Reed in a tailored suit, smirking in front of a DNK advertising banner, spread like wildfire. Anyone else realized the man in Eva Barnes's book is Reed Walker, creative director at DNK Advertising? It said. Within hours, it was everywhere. Reddit, TikTok, parenting blogs. The internet connected the dots with a vengeance. The fallout was brutal. Reed was fired by DNK that same week. Officially, the company cited reputation concerns, but we all knew why. His new girlfriend, the same younger colleague he'd left Eva for, dumped him almost immediately after the scandal broke. Apparently, it didn't look so glamorous anymore. being the other woman in a memoir that painted her man as a coward who walked away from his family. The tabloids circled like sharks. Online headlines read, Reed Walker, the real villain behind Shelter from the Storm. From executive to exposed. How one man became a meme from modern cowardice. Eva showed me one post that had gone viral. A side-by-side image of Reed's professional headshot and a screenshot from the security footage of her on our parents' porch. The caption said, he chose suits and a mistress over this. Despicable. I didn't follow social media closely, but I saw enough. I felt no pity. He had destroyed a life. He had walked away. He deserved every ounce of fallout. But then, one morning, as I was brewing coffee, Eva walked into the kitchen. Her face was pale, her eyes unfocused. She held her phone like it had personally hurt her. Alec, she said, her voice barely audible. Reed just emailed me. I froze. What does he want? I asked, a little sharper than I intended. She swallowed hard, then opened the message. Eva, she read, her voice soft and shaking. I know I messed up. I want to see Lena and Josie. I want to apologize to you. Please give me a chance. She looked up, eyes searching mine. What do you think? I don't know what to do. I stared into my coffee mug, the steam fogging my glasses. My pulse ticked faster. You don't owe him anything, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He abandoned you. He abandoned them. He's only coming back now because he has nowhere else to go. He's not sorry. He's desperate. Eva looked down. Maybe, she said quietly. But Lena and Josie are his daughters. They deserve to know their father. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from saying what I really wanted to. Instead, I exhaled. Think it over carefully. Don't rush into anything. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Reed didn't stop at the email. He started texting, calling. And then one afternoon, after I got home from the site, dust still clinging to my boots, I found him. Standing at the bottom of the apartment stairs, drenched in Portland rain. Same leather coat. Same tired charm. But this time, his face looked worn, eyes bruised with exhaustion. Still, the smugness hadn't fully left. It hovered in the corners of his mouth like it always did. Alec, he said, lifting his hand like we were old college friends catching up. I just want to talk to Eva. I stepped in front of him, arms crossed, blocking the stairwell. She doesn't want to see you. Leave, Reed. He sighed, like I was being unreasonable. Look, I know I screwed up, but I'm Lena and Josie's father. I have a right to see them. Rights. I snapped, anger rising so fast it nearly choked me. You lost those when you ditched them for another woman. Get out of here before I call the cops. Reed stepped back a little, but he didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on mine, like a challenge. You can't keep me from my kids forever, Alec, he said quietly, then turned and walked off into the rain. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding like jackhammers at the sight. My fists were clenched so tightly it hurt. It felt like I had just stared down a wolf at my own door. When I finally came inside, Eva looked up from the couch, her expression tense. What happened? I hesitated, then sat down beside her. Reed was outside. Her face went pale. What? What did he say? I shook my head. Nothing that matters. Just more of his manipulation. He's not going to stop unless we make him. She stared at the floor, then looked up at me. Alec, what if he really does want to see the girls? I don't want Lena and Josie to grow up not knowing their father. I reached over and took her hand, my voice soft, steady. Eva, he doesn't care about the girls. He didn't when he left, and he doesn't now. He's just using you, using your fame, to patch up his public image. She didn't respond, but the look in her eyes told me part of her still wanted to believe there was good left in him. I couldn't fault her for that. Hope was hard to kill, even when it shouldn't be there. But it didn't end there. At a book signing in Seattle, Reed showed up. I was backstage holding Josie, bouncing her gently, while Eva signed copies for a long line of readers. I noticed him the second he stepped into the front row, clean-shaven, wearing a smug expression like nothing had changed. Before security could react, he stepped forward, hand raised. Eva, he called out, his voice echoing in the suddenly quiet room. I'm sorry. I was wrong to leave you and the kids. I just want a chance to make things right. I froze, Josie pressed to my chest. My first instinct was to rush out there, drag him off stage by the collar, but Eva looked up and caught my eye. She shook her head subtly, raising her hand. A signal. She turned to him, pen still in her hand, and spoke with a voice that trembled but didn't break. Reed, she said, if you're truly sorry, you'll leave me and the kids alone. Don't turn this into a performance. Applause broke out, rising slowly and then building into a wave. But Reed didn't move right away. He just stood there, eyes fixed on her like he couldn't believe she'd called his bluff. After a long pause, he lowered his head and walked out of the room. The clip went viral within hours. Some people called Reed a broken man trying to make amends. But most called him what he really was, a coward staging a publicity stunt to save his reputation. The internet was torn, and Eva, once again, was dragged into a storm of public noise. "I didn't want this, Alec," she said one night, curled up on the couch with Lena in one arm and Josie in the other. "I just want to protect them." Her voice broke as she buried her face in her hands. I sat beside her, feeling helpless, furious, protective. But Reed didn't stop. He began sending gifts to Lena and Josie's preschool. Stuffed animals, crayons, books, handwritten notes that said, "Daddy loves you." The teachers were concerned. They called Eva, asked about the situation. Every night, Eva started double-checking the locks. She stopped putting the girls in their cribs and began sleeping with them clutched tightly against her. Her spark dimmed, and fear took root. "That was it. Enough," I said one morning, tossing my phone onto the kitchen counter after Eva showed me yet another text from Reed. "We need to end this." I called Shasha, the same lawyer who helped us fight our parents. She agreed to take the case, and once she read through the recent texts and reports, her voice grew cold with resolve. "This is harassment. We'll file for a restraining order." We gathered everything: emails, texts, the viral video, the notes to the preschool. Shasha prepared the petition requesting a 3-year order barring Reed from any contact and requiring counseling and a parenting program if he ever wanted visitation rights in the future. When the court date arrived, I sat beside Eva, my arm steady around her shoulders. The courtroom was quiet, cold. Reed entered dressed in a suit that looked borrowed. He tried to hold his head high, but it didn't carry the same confidence as before. He looked across the aisle, directly at Eva. His eyes were soft, maybe even pleading. But she didn't respond. Shasha presented the evidence like a seasoned warrior sharpening her blade with every fact. The text messages, the emails, the notes Reed left at the preschool, all of it laid bare. She didn't raise her voice or embellish a word. She didn't need to. "Your Honor," she said firmly, her eyes never leaving the bench, "this is not remorse. It's escalation. Obsession. Eva Barnes and her daughters deserve peace. They deserve protection." Reed's lawyer stood and tried to spin the narrative into redemption. He's a father who made mistakes. He's lost everything. His job, his relationship. He only wants to reconnect with his children. I watched the judge carefully, but his expression didn't change. 2 hours passed like a slow-moving storm. Finally, the judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and spoke with clarity that made my spine straighten. "Mr. Walker is hereby barred from contacting Ms. Barnes or her daughters, directly or indirectly, for a period of 3 years. Furthermore, he is ordered to complete a parenting responsibility course and attend counseling sessions before he may petition for reconsideration of visitation rights." The gavel fell. Beside me, Eva exhaled, her shoulders trembling as if she'd been holding her breath for weeks. She reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "It's over. For now, you're safe." Reed left without so much as a glance in our direction. No final words. No fake apology. Just the soft squeak of his shoes across the courtroom floor as he walked out of our lives. After that, the rhythm of life returned. Not untouched, not unscarred, but steady. We went back to the apartment. The same walls, the same creaky balcony door. But the heaviness was gone, like a fog finally lifting. Even the rain sounded different, less like mourning, more like memory. Eva didn't slow down. If anything, she burned brighter. She began writing again, night after night. Her sequel was nothing like the first memoir. It was bolder, sharper. "Freedom is when you no longer need for forgiveness." That was her title. A mouthful, sure, but it said everything. This time, she wrote not just about survival, but about reclamation. She chronicled the lawsuit with our parents. The fear Reed brought back into her life. The doubts she wrestled with every night she sat at her writing desk. And she wrote about me. Again, she called me her quiet compass. Said I never gave her directions, only stood steady so she could find her own way. I didn't say much when I read that. Just turned the page, blinked a few times, and went to brew coffee. Lena and Josie were nearly 3 now, full of chaos, laughter, and energy that turned our living room into a carnival most mornings. They chased bubbles in the park, drew galaxies with chalk on the pavement. Josie tried to befriend every bug she met. Lena talked to trees like they were people. The whole neighborhood adored them. Eva's little girls, they called them. At preschool, parents would smile at me like we all shared a secret. "They're growing up beautifully," one of the teachers said once. "Strong little spirits." I'd nod, thank them, then walk back home with the stroller and a heart full of something that felt like peace. My own life had taken a shape I never expected. Mornings filled with storybooks and spilled juice. Afternoons tending to a scrappy balcony garden where mint and daisies thrived in clay pots. I stopped asking what life was supposed to look like. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was mine. I never reached out to Maya again. Sometimes I'd think of her, wonder where she was, whether she found what she was looking for. But I never felt regret. Not once. I made my choice, and I stood by it. One afternoon, at a book signing Eva held in downtown Portland, I stood in the corner with a cup of coffee, watching her chat with readers. She was radiant, confident in a way that didn't just show in her smile, but lived in her posture, her voice, her presence. Like her glow had become a permanent part of her. I stood near the back of the room, half watching, half lost in thought, until I noticed a young woman step forward. Maybe 20, 21 at most. She looked nervous, clinging to a worn copy of Shelter from the Storm. Her hands trembled. Then she dropped the book and wrapped Eva in a tight hug, sobbing softly against her shoulder. "You saved my life," the young woman said, her voice broken and raw. "Your book helped me stand up after my family disowned me. I thought I was alone." Eva didn't hesitate. She hugged her back like she'd known her for years. "It wasn't me," she whispered gently, brushing the girl's hair back. Then she looked across the room, her eyes finding me. "It was my brother." I looked down quickly, pretending to adjust my shirt collar, but there was no hiding the weight in my chest. It wasn't pride exactly, more like a fullness, a quiet ache that said, "You mattered." I didn't need the spotlight. Never had. I didn't want stages or microphones or strangers knowing my name. But in that moment, seeing Eva hold that girl, seeing her look at me like that, I knew every sacrifice, every late night with a bottle, every tear Eva had cried into my shoulder had meant something. When the signing ended and the bookstore lights dimmed, we headed home. The sky had turned the soft color of damp slate. Rain misted over Portland's sidewalks as I carried Lena and Josie, one dozing on each shoulder, their tiny hands tangled in the collar of my coat. Back at the apartment, the lights were low. Eva sat beside me on the old sofa, still in her green dress, her heels kicked off. She leaned against me slowly, like she always did when we were kids, and the world felt too loud. "Alec," she whispered, "thank you for everything." I smiled, ruffling her hair just like I used to. "Go to sleep, little sis. Tomorrow's a new day." Outside, the Portland rain kept falling, but it didn't sound the way it used to. Not like sorrow or endings. It was softer now, like music, like memory. A reminder that no matter how many storms came, we had learned to stand strong together. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.